This is Fountain
Every
Street
week I find it
Church.
hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here,
aren't right.
we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
The swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
I want to take a moment to thank three very special young people who are among many 8th graders and a couple of 9th graders this year who are participating in coming of age rites of passage through our character school, Tower Club, and Fountain Club. And Tommy and Hannah and Aubrey, who were robed here and speaking this morning, took that step which traditionally is a sign of a rite of passage into adulthood, of becoming a speaker from the pulpit. They were outstanding. Thank you. I took a trip this spring break with my tribe, which includes 5 teenagers. We flew to California, where I was born and raised, and started south of Los Angeles at my brother's house, rented 2 cars, put 5 very large teenage bodies in 2 cars, and drove the entire coast of California up the Pacific Coast Highway. It's an extraordinary piece of creation. And it so happened that at the time at which we got to the piece of Highway 1 where there is no turning back, and it will be hours upon hours before you will find a way to get out, that my bride Dana was with our 2 14-year-old boys. And as the car came into that extraordinary piece of the road where the mountains cascade into the sea, the 2 14-year-old boys were doing what any rational 14-year-old boy would do when delivered into one of the most astounding displays of creation on the face of the planet. They read basketball magazines. So noticing this, Dana called them to take attention of what was before them, of the extraordinary and sacred, reverent nature that was being unleashed before them mile after mile. And she said to them, "Boys, I don't want you to miss this. Do you not see the sacredness of this place?" And they turned to her from the back seat and said, "Whatever. We'll come back to them." My life with the sacred, particularly with the sacred in animals, did not begin so well either. It begins at about age 6, the day my father decided to sell his cherished baby blue 1966 Buick Skylark convertible. At 6 years old, I knew how sacred this car was. And so we made a final pilgrimage to the little lake and pond by Stanford University, at which we had gathered frogs all of our young lives. And we gathered one last frog to bring home and put in our garden. And as we pulled back into the driveway, my frog, who I already named Henry, jumped out of my hands and down in between the crack of the seat. And so we began the hour-long process of dismantling the entire 66 Buick Skylark convertible to find Henry the frog. And we never found him. And at 48, I still am feeling guilty about Henry the frog. And it didn't move up from there, unfortunately. My next animal was Mistress the mouse, a beautiful little furry thing that I was sure I was equipped to care for, until I came home one day having forgotten about her for some period of time, and she was in that sort of I'm not moving anymore pose. And I attended then my first funeral, and I wailed. And I began to understand something of the responsibility that the ancient story says we have with and through all created things. Things improved substantially with the golden retriever that arrived shortly thereafter, named Linus, after my favorite Peanuts character. Wisdom suggests that both boys and dogs behave better when tired. We helped each other with this. But one day, or maybe a whole lot of days, I forgot to close the gate to the backyard, and so Linus journeyed down like any good golden retriever to meet the world and all the kids at the elementary school. And one little girl who thought he was as wonderful as I did reached and gave him her sandwich, and he grabbed a little too fast and a little too hard and left a really wonderful set of teeth marks in her hand. And he invited me to the faith practice called apology and responsibility. And some 30 years later, my second golden retriever was actually responsible for introducing me to my wife, because we were at the soccer field and she had a young daughter, and young daughters know intuitively that golden retrievers, especially old gray ones, need to be loved. And so she dragged her mom over to me, who was reading some odd esoteric book on kinesiology, to meet the dog, and she said, "Who is this man who would read a book like this?" And today we are a tribe of 7. This wonderful dog, Buddy, passed on with my oldest daughter, Haley, who took your offering this morning, who slept in the hallway with him for the last month of his life and witnessed to me the practice of reverence and companionship, even nursing him into something we came to refer to as the resurrection. For the several days before he passed on, literally this dog was like Lazarus and rose and lived with us as if he were a puppy for about 72 hours and then passed away. I haven't lived with a domestic animal for a while. We have 5 domestic animals at home. This experience has invited Dana and I to adopt the animals of our yard. We have big fat squirrel, beautiful bunny, crazy bird. And I am astounded by how important these animals are to the telling of the story of our life together. I now get why my grandparents counted the days and marked the calendar when the birds would return and tell them the story of how the seasons were moving. It is the story of these moving seasons that moves us with the animals and the plants of creation. It is the story of a longer or a shorter winter. It is the story of our care and our failure to care. It is the story the bees are telling us. It is the story of the wolves and the UP. It is the story of our cats and our dogs and our bunnies and our squirrels and our horses. Which leads me back to that car ride and the 14-year-old boys who couldn't be bothered with the extraordinary display of creation because basketball is sacred. These boys, like the animals we bring today, knew something of reverence that maybe we didn't. Because that car ride ended at my mother's home, a home she had been connected to for more than 50 years, a home in which she recently lost a husband, a home in which she sold the week we arrived. And so this journey became something of a pilgrimage, we thought, to help her end this extraordinary 5 decades in a place we had all been cared for, greeted, blessed. For 50 years, my mother had walked the path from our home around the hills and up to a plateau, a bluff, that overlooked the 5,000-acre preserve that Stanford University had turned into a horse ranch. And in the middle of that pasture upon which you would gaze out each day, there was a lone oak tree, one of the biggest oak trees I have ever seen. And it had stood there for centuries, witness, sentinel to our lives together. And around that tree each day at about the middle of noon, the horses would come to gather, about 20 of them. And we had been told as children not to approach the horses, that you can get hurt. And so though we would walk through the pastures, we always steered clear of the tree and the horses. It was a sacred place. It was theirs. But on the last morning, my mother called out to all of us, and particularly to the two 14-year-olds who wanted to find a basketball court, not a moment of reverence. And she said, "We're going for a walk." And we walked out into that pasture towards that tree which she named the center of the universe, to take one last visit, one last moment with that holy oak, and we assumed the horses. But as we opened the gate behind our friend's home that would lead us out into the pasture, we all came to be aware that for the first time in any of our lives, the horses had left the tree and were standing to the side. They were the priests who had decided to leave the sanctuary to us. And so we walked to the great oak, and my mother asked us to make a circle around it. And it took all 8 of us, our arms fully outstretched, to get around the entire base of this enormous tree. And my mother, whom we all thought we were there to comfort, began to sing. And she sang, "Swing Low." And those 14-year-old boys, who we were so sure didn't get it, were the first ones to join their voices and to weep. Our animals and our children can invite us to places more sacred than we can imagine. The creation speaks, even when we are not looking, even when we cannot hear. Let us this day be moved to awe and to reverence. Let us have eyes to see and ears to hear. Let us call reverence to ourselves. Let us speak reverence of all that lives. May it be so. As Fred mentioned, we will now invite those who would like their animals to be blessed to travel up the center aisles and down to the outsides and down the outside aisles, where you will be greeted and blessed, asked to share the name of you and your animal.